Welcome to the show. How you doing?
Thank you guys. I'm a big fan of the show. You guys have done such a good job. I love the announcement. So
Yes.
happy to jump into it.
Yeah. The idea with those is, very low TAM, but we want to set the Slack account on fire in whatever company gets one of those messages. But thanks for joining the show today. We want to talk about the release today. Can you break down the announcement, how regularly these spending reports are, and then we'll go into some of the top takeaways.
Yeah, I mean, I'll start by talking about the main question that I get asked a lot is that, what is my job? Why do I do it? Why does Ramp even have an economist? I think it confuses a lot of people.
Mhm.
Uh, but I think it really does come from Ramp's product, right? It's a spend platform, but what Ramp I think figured out very effectively is that businesses aren't just looking to spend money, they're looking for help on how to make decisions, how to spend their money most effectively, what the best businesses are doing.
Mhm.
And so features like that are always integrated into Ramp's product to help businesses make, those kinds of calls. But the logic of my role is that we can help a lot more businesses make decisions by making a lot more of that data public. Data both about how businesses are spending money, but also where these economic trends are going and how your business can operate uh, within them. And so our latest spending report, what we put out this month, gets right at that. We're looking at trends in AI adoption. Our main
Mhm.
finding is that 35.5% of American businesses have already adopted AI to produce goods and services. That's 4.5 times higher than the current US Census estimate. And
Huh.
then we also posted a lot of results about general business spend trends, where businesses are spending more money, where they're pulling back. But the idea here is really to be able to say something really compelling and new about what's going on in the economy
Yeah.
and try to respond to the fact that there's not a lot of public data available about where businesses are spending right now.
Can you, just jumping right into the first point, can you talk about how you guys came to the 35.5% number? Because I imagine it's pretty hard to triangulate given that, you can get AI in a non like AI, product as an example, right? Like you're using Google Workspace and it sort of like, pops up a little like, magic wand icon and you click it and that's like technically using AI.
Clippy's
But then
coming back. We've said
Clippy's
this
coming
here.
back. We're bullish
We're
on
we're
Clippy.
making a poly market
No,
for it.
but then differently, it's like a company directly spending money on OpenAI or
Yep. Yep.
Grok or Anthropic or any of these other things. So I'm curious how you got there because we've been talking. We were just talking with Tyler Cowan. What is AI adoption right now? It
Yeah.
feels like in our world, it feels like it's 100%,
Yep.
but it's also very different to use OpenAI as like a search engine versus using it to develop software,
Yep.
right?
Totally.
Yeah, well, you guys are getting at the key issue with a lot of these conversations about AI is that nobody's really sure where to draw the line
Yeah.
about what AI is, if it's going to be integrated into every single tool.
Yeah.
And that's similarly, I think, what you get with the problem of a lot of AI adoption measurements. The current US Census survey, for example, is just a survey question.
Hmm.
And it's asking one person at the company, typically the person who answers the phone, whether or not they're using AI to produce goods and services. And it's kind of a confusing question to answer because what does that mean? Does it mean we're using AI for our manufacturing processes and robots, or are we using it to make sure all of our customer service agents have this body of knowledge which can answer questions? I mean, by the way, no shade to the Census Bureau. They produce a lot of really great work, and shout out to them. They have a lot of really great economists on staff. But I do think we can do a lot better if we're trying to measure AI adoption. We should probably use data sets that measure actual transaction activity.
Yeah.
We have access to the contracts that businesses are using to engage with the large model companies. We can actually see the size of those contracts, how that adoption is changing, and particularly how that's changing in different sectors. And that's really where you get a lot of the variability, right? I mean, you see adoption rates in our measurement for technology are about 65% in the tech sector. And that sounds kind of low. You'd think, why is there a tech company that hasn't adopted some kind of AI tool? But when you look at this actual spend data, you also have to remind yourself that businesses are much more diverse than we realize.
Hmm.
There are large and small companies that are still evaluating whether or not AI makes sense for their business. There are companies that are still using the free versions, they're employees at many companies that are using their own
Yeah.
free plan. That's not going to be captured in our data set either.
And there's other companies that are spending money with Accenture
Yeah.
saying like, we want to have an AI strategy, but
Yeah.
we're going to give you
We'll
like,
review the
you know,
deck in Q4 and
we're
then
gonna give
decide if
you
AI is right for us.
$200 million.
Have you had like venture capitalists reach out to you like, hey, let me get an
Yeah.
early read on the spend report. I want to front run it. Because I feel like every time I see the screenshot go out, I'm like, okay, there's the next series. There's the next set of Series Bs that are going out.
Yeah, we get that question. I get a message on LinkedIn or Twitter daily. There are probably people who are listening who are going to message me now or that have
Yeah.
responded to. The goal is to make this data public.
Yeah, of course.
Goal is to make it as available to as many people as possible. And look, there's the business side of it where we
Yeah.
really do want to help businesses make better decisions.
Yeah.
But there is also a public service aspect to this kind of work, which is, look, if AI is going to be this transformative technology that's going to change our economy, it's going to move all of our economic indicators, it's going to increase labor productivity, the very first place we're going to see that is in AI adoption rates.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you are a policymaker that is building policies going to try to move these metrics, we should probably know what that metric is.
Yeah.
And I don't think 8% that's the current US census estimate. I just don't think that's the right number. But even so, I think we can add something to the public discourse by showing people, well, there's still a lot of room to grow. I mean, we have 18% of restaurants on our platform are also using AI right now. And that doesn't mean they're using it to serve people, but when we talk to them, they're using it for a lot of back office tasks, which means 82% of restaurants haven't done that yet.
Yeah.
And
Can you restate those high level numbers? Census at 8%, and then your estimate was what?
35.5% is our estimate across U.S. businesses.
That's like significantly higher.
Accelerating.
Not like
Last month's growth was higher than previous months.
Wow.
So it's saying that we're not at this point yet where AI adoption is plateaued, where companies have figured out how to implement it yet.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say is that what we have observed is there's this sort of learning curve in AI adoption, where your first month on an AI platform does not mean that's how you're going to stick to implementing into your operations. You might be evaluating multiple vendors. We often see in ramp data that businesses are multi-homing AI vendors and using OpenAI, but they're also using Anthropic and they're using the more verticalized services available to them. See a lot of experimentalism where they use one model for 1 month and they switch to a different vendor for another month. So all of this stuff is still very early. It's still developing.
Yeah. What is the ramp data showing about the current market chaos and tumult around tariffs?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really common question that we've gotten. Look, we haven't seen a significant slowdown if that was the concern, we haven't seen a sort of slowdown in business spend on ramp data yet. And it's typically what you'll find in both ramp data, but you'll find that in a lot of public and private data sets as well. I mean, last week, we did go out and actually talk to a bunch of businesses. We interviewed 30 businesses in retail and construction and manufacturing to try to figure out how they did feel about tariffs. And we found a few main points in our findings, I think. We found, first of all, there's a lot of policy uncertainty that businesses are concerned about. They're not sure how to respond to the tariffs, how to adjust their operations quite yet. A lot of them are in this sort of wait and see mode where they're trying to wait for tariff policy to settle before they make significant changes in their spending decisions. So that's part of why I think we haven't seen that in our data yet. Though we did talk to several businesses who told us that they were pausing all capital expenditures until they see the tariff policy is clearly settled. How that's going to affect our data, I do think we're going to need a couple more months to really find it. But so far, we haven't seen aggregate changes in business spend in both ramp data and in private data sets, public data sets.
Is there another leading indicator? I mean, AI might be something, I know it's like the most important segment to follow in the spending report, but at the same time, I imagine that a company that's going into a tumultuous financial market, that might not be the first place that they cut. They might actually double down on AI and cut back. But in terms of the type of expenditures that go through corporate cards, what's kind of the canary in the coal mine for a recession? You know, in like the Fed data, we usually look at like credit card delinquencies or car loan repayments or something like that. But are there specific categories within corporate spend at American companies that you would expect to track more closely as a leading indicator of a recession?
Yeah, and it's definitely going to depend on the sector.
Sure.
So we're going to have some sectors that are a little bit more exposed to tariffs that are going to be making those changes a little bit sooner than others.
Sure.
Uh, I mean, I generally start by looking at the largest categories of spend by business and thinking about where you're going to see budgeting or movement there. So advertising is one. Digital advertising I think is a really great way of measuring how businesses feel about the economy.
Yeah.
And, we rely a lot in the public sphere on these CFO surveys or CEO surveys about business expectations. But if you really want to know how a business feels about their prospects, you should look at their digital ad spend.
Yeah, that makes
Because
sense.
that is what's going to capture whether or not they see the value in putting ad dollars toward trying to get new customers or increase their revenues. Uh, I mean, we're seeing some changes there. So we're seeing, as of last month, year over year, 55% of large businesses reduced their ad spending or kept it the same. Small businesses, however, but that's going to include startups, are increasing their ad spend year over year. That's going to be a harder sector to track. Startups don't always track the overall economy. They can be a little skewed in that way. But it is worth noting that we are seeing some declines in advertising spend, which could suggest some kind of
weakness.
you
Pull
know,
back.
Yeah, it's just an easy thing to react. You can go into Facebook
Of
or
course.
Google and just immediately reduce
Yeah.
your budgets, and it's a way to just be a bit more,
And I
pragmatic.
think secretly every entrepreneur thinks, am I really getting my money's worth on those Google brand keyword ads? Like maybe we should do that holdback test and cut those back this month and then
Yeah.
see what happens to revenue. And then eventually they sneak back in and you're like, I want to own my keyword.
Can you talk about spend across the different model providers, even at a high level? I know
that'd be
there had been some interesting data on DeepSeek specifically.
Oh, yeah.
Earlier this year. But can you dig in there?
Yeah, so OpenAI is the clear leader in the model companies across business adoption. More than a quarter of businesses on our platform have an active contract with OpenAI.
That's
And
crazy.
yeah, and they were the first mover, and it
Yeah.
just shows you they're sort of become synonymous with AI products and companies.
Totally.
And that's not just coming from chat subscriptions; it's coming from their sort of API integrations down the line too. Anthropic is second, and they are still growing very quickly. But OpenAI is a clear leader in all of the markets that we're tracking. Though we are still seeing a lot of growth in some of the newcomers to the market too. XAI has grown very quickly, despite only being a couple months old, really, operating. Grok 3 pushed a lot of their adoption up. You're still seeing some amount of experimentalism, some amount of that learning curve from businesses. DeepSeek had a really big spike in January when it really came to fruition. That slowed down a lot the following month. And XAI has now sort of leapfrogged it. But they're still relatively small players.
Yeah. Is it hard to understand AI spend with the hyperscalers? Because you can go to Microsoft and vend, GPT-4 API into your organization, but that's probably just going to show up as Azure on your ramp bill. If you're even billing it to your corporate card, you might have
You'd be
payment
surprised.
terms.
I really have such a lucky job. As for sort of a private sector economist,
Yeah.
I sit on such a good data set because a lot of those bills, they produce the line items for API credits. And
Oh
what
yeah,
model
because you get the
you're spending.
receipts too. It's not just the charge. Yeah.
For DeepSeek, that was originally a challenge because how do you pay DeepSeek? Particularly when a lot of the business implementation of DeepSeek was not necessarily going to go through DeepSeek, the company,
Totally.
because of the security concerns with using DeepSeek.
Yep.
And a lot of it was going through sort of these hyperscalers or a lot of the other sort of companies that allow you to integrate an AI model that's working on their own local servers.
Yeah.
But even then, we'll see DeepSeek as the line item. And so we started putting that data out, try to get at, we put an article out last month about whether or not businesses are actually adopting DeepSeek in high rates, so that business can really figure out, where is this market trending? I think it's extremely hard to figure out without some data, given how quickly everything's moving in this industry.
What does your tech stack look like for some of these analyses? Are you IPython notebooks? Are you using Julia or Julius? Two different data
But
analysis
people can make fun of me, but I do a lot of work in a notebook.
Yeah.
It's great. I mean, it's scaled very effectively. But the real goal is to put things out quickly.
Yeah.
And so, we have a lot of notebooks that are just outputting directly to our website
Oh, very cool.
every month. And similarly with the benchmark report that we just released,
Yeah.
the goal, I mean, you'll note that it goes all the way through March data. And so the goal is to really provide people with the earliest available data as soon as possible, because particularly in this news environment right now,
Yeah.
things can just become immediately outdated.
Yeah. Jordy?
What does AI adoption look like across different teams? Because I can imagine at some of these larger companies, you have an engineering team that's using, Devon or Anthropic or Cursor, and then you have, the marketing team, which is using some like app layer company, or they're just using OpenAI to generate images.
Yeah.
How are you seeing it kind of roll out?
Well, AI adoption is generally going to be higher at the large companies than the small companies. And we think it's for that specific reason. Large companies have many more teams, many of them using AI products and services, many of them aren't. And then those teams at those large companies will then evangelize the products they're using throughout the company and increase the adoption rate that way. I mean, the model companies are still growing at a very fast rate, but one thing we saw this past month was that the sort of coding platforms, the quote unquote vibe coding platforms, the Cursors of the world, the Lovable, those are currently growing faster than the model companies themselves. Seeing growth rates in the 40s right now. And so, people talk about, whether or not, any of this growth is sustainable. For what it's worth, businesses are clearly acquiring value from them.
Yeah.
And the way these sort of products are developed, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how they get integrated. I mean, Canva just announced its version of it too.
Yeah.
That was also one of our fastest growing vendors last month, but it wasn't because of an AI coding thing. It was just because it's a really fast growing vendor that's implementing AI across all of its features.
Yeah. Have you gotten pushback from any of these companies saying like, hey, maybe don't leak our financials? Or like, it's like you're sharing too much insight actually.
Completely anonymous, so I don't think it's...
Yeah, it's anonymous, but again, you're naming like a specific company, and for most of the companies, it looks amazing, and it's like, wow, they're growing so fast. But
you mean on the customer side?
Yeah. Like you get an email from OpenAI saying like, hey, like because of your spend report,
secondaries being
people
repriced.
know that we're growing at 30% instead of 40%, or this is off, and we're actually growing bigger in non-ramp customers, and so your data's low.
Yeah. What's interesting about it is that we've had customers that we reported on reach out to us for more data on what we're reporting on. You can imagine that what's really great about having this data set at Ramp is that in some ways is, the most comprehensive data set you can find about overall spending by businesses. And so you can say large AI company, for example, knows how much spending is happening on its platform, but they don't necessarily know how much spending is happening with the other AI model companies.
Yep.
The desire is really to have some kind of data that estimates that sort of total market view.
Yeah.
And the logic of this role, again, is that businesses really make better decisions when they have access to better information. And I see my role as trying to put that kind of information out so that companies can make decisions that are right for them. Yeah. And it's available to everybody for that reason.
Are there CFOs on Ramp who come to you in a less positive light, instead of saying, oh, what AI model should I be adopting or paying up for? Instead, they're like, give me what should I be cutting? Like, where are the biggest places to save money instead?
Yeah.
Or they're looking at like declines, and then they're saying, oh, I'm going to target that. If everyone's unsubscribing from, I don't know, Netflix in their organization or something, they're going to try and do that internally to save money.
They do. And that's the fundamental goal of this kind of work, is not just to show you what to buy, but it's to show you, first of all, what to cut, what other businesses are cutting, and how can you benchmark your business relative to how others are performing.
Yeah.
The goal is that if you have access to this kind of data through Ramp's product, but also through the kind of research that we put out, you might get a better picture about, what it really means to be a high-performing business, how to run most efficiently, which vendors to use and select, and which vendors other people in your industry are using, and then which ones they're not using.
Yeah.
One thing you pulled out was that TikTok's ad platform leads in year-over-year spend growth, signaling advertisers have not been deferred by the prospect of a ban. My question when I saw this was, is it possible that people are like, hey, we think this platform could get banned. Let's basically try to acquire every
squeeze everything out of it at the last second.
Squeeze it.
Because rates will be low.
Yeah,
I
and,
think
and
I think what's showing you is why there's going to be such a big bidding war for this kind of
Mm,
platform,
sure.
right?
Yeah.
The ad spend just continues to grow. Their user base, I imagine, still continues to grow.
Yeah.
It is really one of those unique platforms that is able to both attract a lot of visitors, but also keep them on the platform for a long time. It's made ads on short form video kind of work well, and it's still growing a lot. I mean, I'm really interested in seeing how how this sort of TikTok fight plays out in the business side.
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense.
Polymarket has the recession at 51%. What does your gut tell you as an economist? How are we looking?
My real goal here is just to put out data to help people make their appropriate guesses. I
Yeah.
mean, I do think there are a lot of headwinds, what we're hearing from businesses, so I hope
Yeah.
those get resolved.
Yeah.
But hopefully, I hope people are able to make the decisions that make sense for their businesses based on what we're putting out.
Yeah. That makes sense. Anything else, Jordy?
Do you have any thoughts on AI has the potential to be deflationary in some ways? Let's take like an e-commerce business who, might spend $50,000 a month producing content to make ads,
Mm-hmm.
and then if suddenly they only need to spend like $5,000 a month because they're able to do one shoot and then just like generate iterations of it, or maybe they're eventually able to, just generate all the advertising content that they need. In theory, they would just take that budget and spend it to acquire more customers or spend it to launch new markets or things like that. How do you think about like long term about, as AI drives efficiency, where those dollars flow, right? Because if budget is being, sort of reallocated, because if AI can do something a lot more, inexpensively, the budget will naturally flow to where it can sort of generate the highest possible return. And that could be as simple as like, oh, we spend $20,000 a month for the CPA firm with AI. We now only need to spend $5,000 a month because they don't need as many people, working on it or something like that. But then again, you're going to want to sort of reallocate that spend to continue to grow the business. Do you have any sort of high level thoughts on if it's going to, okay, let's just run more ads or things like that?
Well, I think that reallocation will happen, and I think that's the reason why we probably won't see deflationary pressure. Uh, I'm of the school of thought that AI will be a very transformative technology. I think it's going to change a lot of knowledge work. I think it's going to reduce costs for a lot of businesses. But at the same time, I am also fairly realistic about the fact that many parts of our economy just will never be touched by something like AI.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it will be touched in some ways, right? Like me going to a restaurant, I imagine that restaurant will probably have much easier back office automation because of something like AI. But me sitting down across from someone at a restaurant is not which is a lot of most people's day-to-day spending, right? It's just
Mm-hmm.
going to businesses on your small business street. Most of that is not going to be touched or moved. And so I think we'll see a lot of parts of the economy continue to grow. I think knowledge work is going to change a lot. Uh, and I'm bullish about the impact of AI. Uh, but I do think much of our day-to-day spending is going to stay fairly similar as consumers, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Have you thought about any like more niche industry benchmarking? I remember it was always useful to know how other companies in the same sector, how much are they spending on their legal bills, or how much are they spending on e-commerce development, and kind of have rules of the road. And I did some back of the envelope with some rival companies at one point and found that some of the companies were way overspending. So we should be clearly under that. But I could imagine that type of benchmarking being useful just to kind of allocate budgets to say, hey, realistically, the IT budget at a company of this size in this industry really shouldn't be more than like 5% of our costs or operating costs, anything like that. Have you been able to produce anything like that, or are you thinking about that?
We're working on that right now. I mean, the
Oh, cool.
goal is to be able to see whether or not you're a small construction firm in Kansas City
Yeah.
and this is your current cost structure. Can you compare that to other construction firms in Kansas,
Yeah.
uh, and see how you're sort of tracking relative to them? Uh, I mean, I think that's going to be the real frontier that helps businesses make those kinds of decisions for them.
Totally.
both to find out where they're over-indexed and then when they're under-indexed, and then to try to track their performance following the decisions.
And just make it like a choice. Like there are times when you want to invest more than your competitors in a certain area, but there's other times when you want to be below them, and maybe that's your competitive edge. Well, thanks so much for joining. This was a fantastic
this is great.
conversation.
Let's make it a quarterly thing.
Yeah,
Thank you,
I can't
guys.
wait for the next one.
And thank you for coming prepared.
Yeah, you look
jacket.
fantastic.
I know.
It's great
People
having
always
you.
think it's weird to. Everyone at work is commenting like, "Oh, I can't believe you wore a suit today." It's like this has been the normal component of menswear for centuries.
Yeah.
It's just only
Yeah, I mean,
weird
you
now.
work in finance.
Yeah, you work in
finance tech.
Finance
Yeah.
tech.
So
Yes.
You guys.
dress the part. Great to see you.
We'll talk
Talk
soon.
soon.
Bye.